And whilst a lot of buildings collapsed, people weren't in them. They were tending to the fields or doing community work. And so if it had happened at another point in time, that death toll was expected to rise significantly. And really, the number of affected people came from the buildings that suffered. So a huge number of buildings suffered damage. And prior to the earthquake, the construction was very much unplanned, unregulated, and there was limited adherence to the code. And in addition to that, as I'm sure most people on the call are aware, that 60% of the building stock was unreinforced masonry, and so is relatively poor at withstanding seismic events. So that was the sort of situation for the earthquake. Then the National Reconstruction Authority itself, so that was established straight after the earthquake at the end of 2015. And it was given the remit to sort of a very large remit, really, to do research, to do science, to lead the reconstruction and the retrofitting, to rehouse people who are now landless and provide them with land. And so the remit of the NRA was huge. And one of the first things they did was a damage assessment survey in 2016 to understand of the housing stock, what was fully damaged, what was partially damaged, and what housing was still okay and therefore okay to be lived in. And following that, it was identified that 800,000 there were 800,000 housing beneficiaries. So 800,000 houses needed to either be reconstructed or retrofitted. 800,000, approximately 65,000 of them are retrofitting beneficiaries. So the reconstruction itself got off to a relatively slow start, but 2 to 3 years before COVID, it really saw a very large scale up in numbers. And so where we are now is that around 600,000 new seismically resilient homes have been completed. And so about 3/4 of the houses that were identified have now been completed. I'm sure Dr. Chandra will talk further about that. And the key piece at the moment, so it's coming up to the 6-year anniversary now in a couple of days, and it's the last year of the NRA before they hand over to the NDRRMA, who are the long-term coordination and implementing risk management related functions. And so I should say the NDRMA stands for the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority. So the NRA is really looking to the future. It's looking at how can it condense the learnings it's made over the last 6 years, ensure that they are actually learnt, and then also ensure that they're put to good use for Chandra himself. So Dr. Chandra Shrestha is an executive member of the NRA and has been since 2016. He is a chartered civil engineer with a doctoral degree in transport planning. And he's really led the work at the NRA on retrofitting and has been really the key person and the key driver in retrofitting as an approach, gaining greater acceptance within Nepal, both within government, within engineering community, and also with communities. And so his talk today will really focus on retrofitting in Nepal, the learnings that have been made along the way, and also, in his opinion, the potential that retrofitting holds for the future of Nepal and to make it a more resilient country going forwards. And so having worked with him closely, really over the last few years, especially prior to COVID, and working with him specifically on retrofitting, it's my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Chandra to give his presentation. So I will leave it there, and Dr. Chandra, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alistair. This is really my pleasure to be with this this learned community of UK Shelter Forum. I would like to thank, first of all, to organizer for giving this opportunity to me. Hope my voice is audible to everybody.
Very clear. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lester, for introducing me, myself, as well as National Reconstruction Authority. Just to recapitulate, National Reconstruction Authority was established in December 2015. The earthquake struck in April, on April 25th. And it took quite some time because Nepal had gone through the transitional process. The constitution was still in making, and a lot of political bickerings were there. So it took quite some time, to form National Reconstruction Authority. Otherwise, what I'm trying to say is the reconstruction drive would have started a bit earlier, then we would have made much progress. So the degree of devastation, I think you are all aware of, was really mammoth for the country like Nepal with limited financial, economic, capability. It was really, devastating, and almost, half of the population was impacted, including myself. So I know the pain. What does it really involve, having damaged house? I don't want to spend more time on the background, the destruction, everything that has become the history right now. I would like to go ahead with what we did and what we achieved actually during last 6 years. I'm sharing the slides. Hopefully, this is readable. So I will be basically sharing the experience on retrofitting. But before doing that, in order to set the context, what actually we achieved during this period, so that you can understand what was the expanse of our intervention, and then what did we do during last 6 years. That will set context, the first 2 slides, and then after that, I will go to the retrofitting directly. So only first, broader impacts I will talk about, which will give you some idea actually what we try to do. After that, I will go through retrofitting. So in our impact, right now we are conducting impact study of NRAs. What did we do? What are our impacts? So preliminary impacts results have been already visible right now. You can now just see that housing sector alone generated $5.6 billion of investment. That is huge. Investment. It includes the public as well as private sector. Approximate average cost of one house is around $7,000. That the average of rural and urban. So that is huge. Investment in the housing sector alone, and non-housing sector, it is $2.44 billion. So that is another. That is mainly public sector investment. That also includes partly non-governmental organization, not private. So this is the magnitude of overall investment. And housing sector employment generated 168 million person days. Actually, these figures, you may find different people estimating in different way. We are trying to substantiate this. There are certain assumptions behind. But I think this is based on 700,000 investment and 30% of the total investment in labor, in the labor sector, labor component. So this is how I estimated. And it is 200,000 people for 4.5 years of employment. This is another, huge intervention from our side. And non-housing sector created 36.6 million person days, which is 50,000 workers for 4.5 years. So this, you can see the magnitude. And school enrollment has been increasing. There are a lot of other impacts are emerging now, because the impact study is really in the preliminary stage. That's why we are not claiming too much, but this is what it is quite obvious. So we are creating something like solid basis for earthquake resilient society, because we infused, construction technology for tentatively half of Nepal, and now we are. And I will mention in the way forward. Now, government of Nepal is considering to replicate for the whole nation, and more importantly, we brought people of all 32 districts closer to banking system. I don't have to emphasize the importance of banking system, why it is necessary, required for the prosperity of people to have their link with the bank. So, but we did is we were catalytic agent because we made payment through the banking system. That is also, it looks like quite simple in international environment, but it is extremely vital in the rural context of Nepal, where people live in far-flung, remote, inaccessible mountains. And we have also taken forward social inclusion as an agenda, empowering women, Dalits, and Janjatis through training program. We prioritize them in various different fronts. So we also train, capacity development was enormous actually. We trained government employees who were not trained for reconstruction. Now a huge number of government employees are trained in this, and engineers actually. In the history of Nepal, we mobilized engineers more than 6,000, 3,000 plus engineers all over the districts. And then if we also consider social mobilization, everybody, the number was really, huge, 4,000, 5,000 engineers at a time mobilization. And we also train private sector consultants, the contractor management. We interfered in contractor management of consultants as well as contractors. So we made a lot of, interventions in this sector. There are also quite negative, somehow negative impacts as well. For example, this earthquake affected households. And now we are getting report that because in average they spend 700,000 Nepali rupees, means around 7,000 US dollar per housing, and they are indebted. That is what we have been receiving information from the ground. So this is a bit worrying, and we have to handle how to grapple with this situation. Government is really thinking of it, and then most probably by the end of the day, by the end of NRA, we can think of something, some mitigating measure on that. Similarly, vernacular architecture, as you may have guessed, like everywhere, Nepal also have different, people with different ethnic background, and their housing pattern are influenced by their ethnic background. So that is gone now, because we have very standardized type of houses with CGI roof, and there is uniformity of houses all across 32 districts. It is a bit worrying actually. Now, what to do with this architecture? We are now also really thinking of this. And the next, point is vulnerable household. We are taking care of vulnerable households, but this activity had to be done at the outset. Initially, we focused more on the reconstruction of housing, and vulnerable households were taken care of, but not emphasized the way how they should have been. That is what in our retrospection, we are thinking in that way at present. And another factor is uniform support package for urban as well as rural area. That didn't address the problem of urban complexity. We had to also think of, we should have some different strategy for urban area. That is what we are realizing now. And we are developing a strategy for handling urban issue. We started before, that is going on, and the steering committee meeting of before 1 week mandated NRA to develop urban housing model. So that we are working on that. I'm leading also that intervention. So we are working on that. These are something like whether you would like to say negative or something like limitations of NRA intervention. But by and large, on this 6th Memorial Day, tomorrow we are going to celebrate. Day after tomorrow we are going to celebrate 6th Memorial Day. But I am quite happy. Whole NRA family is happy for the delivery, for the performance what we made during these last 6 years. Now I will focus more on retrofitting. I would like to give, timeline which shows that, how we handle retrofitting. Well, where was the problem, lacunae in a way, in this whole intervention? We promulgated housing grant policy working procedure on 2016 December 29. So after around 1 year of not 1 year actually, 2015 April, say, around 1 year, sometime after that time, we promulgated housing grant because we took time for formulation of this, and it was revised. 2016 December 29, and 2016 June. Actually, there was one typo. 2015 December 29 is the date for the housing grant 2000, because we introduced first. NRA was introduced immediately after that. We introduced housing grant policy as well. And after in 2016, we classified beneficiaries. At the beginning, as you can see here, that there was provision of grant for 2,000 only. There was no discrimination between reconstruction and retrofitting. All was considered as reconstruction alone. Later on, we realized that there are certain houses which can be retrofitted. So we classified those houses into two groups: reconstruction houses, retrofitting houses. But then that was done in 2016 June. It means around 1 year, some few months after this was introduced. As you can see, 26 December 2016, grant increased to 3,000, from 2,000 to 3,000, and for retrofitting 500 to 1,000. That was the grant, increment. And you can see 25 September 2017, only repair and retrofitting manual was introduced. March 2018, light timber steel frame structure manual. So this timeline, what do this timeline show is? A timeline show is NRA, the policymaker, we are not quite sure actually how should we handle retrofitting, whether it is a viable option. There was ambivalence. We were very much clear in terms of new construction, but we are not much clear in terms of retrofitting, whether this retrofitting intervention really works. We had some doubt there. That's why you can read this timeline, in the timeline. And as a consequence of that, we categorize 78,000 plus are out of 800,000 house total beneficiaries. 78,000 are retrofitting category households in 32 districts, but only less than 1,000. Actually, this is a very dismal figure. So if you see that from the delivery point of view, retrofitting, we did make much progress. Does it really mean that our efforts were wasted? In a way, then I would not say so. We could not make progress, but we laid foundation for retrofitting. That is what we think. And yeah, I would like to take you through some potential of retrofitting, or what is the context of retrofitting. In 2011, statistics, it says that 40% of houses were mud bonded, brick and stone mud bonded structure, and 18% cement bonded brick and stone, with pillar 10%, wooden pillar 25%, other 2%. This is the characteristics of our housing stock. That's what I would like to say. And what does it will be? Why it is important? This statistics is important. It is important because 70% of 2015 earthquake affected houses of stone masonry, followed by a board. You see this 44% and cement bonded, 18%. This was the category. 44% and 18% were the major category where this earthquake struck, where earthquake damaged houses. That's why this classification is extremely important. As it stands now, we don't have statistics, clear statistics nationwide. We have statistics for say, 32 districts. So based on our executive judgment, approximately 40% of housing is still stock are still vulnerable. If the earthquake strikes, and then we may need to take a destruction of huge amount of destruction if no mitigating measures are followed. That's what I would like to emphasize here. And the fourth point is NRA could not deliver retrofitting as expected. We wanted to retrofit all 78,000 case loads, but we created huge amount of resources. Earlier, we hadn't had that resources. We had limited, experience of public building or so, but then we hadn't have experience in terms of private housing, whether this private housing retrofitting will work or not, that we were quite ambivalent or not sure. But now we are very much confident that these modalities really work. I would like to show before initiating discussion actually what are the typologies of houses in Nepal. So first is this is stone mud mortar house, SMM, mud mortar house, maybe it is brick structure. Another is brick and mud mortar. These are row houses typically in urban areas, particularly in Kathmandu Valley. Third is typical brick in cement mortar. There is no framed structure, but load-bearing structure, but cement mortar and brick. And this figure 6 and 5 and 6, you can see there are a number of timber houses as well. They are not much common in hilly areas, but they are common in the plain areas. If you are familiar with Nepal's situation, there is plain area. In plain area before, not now, there was abundance of timber. And because of that abundance of timber, they constructed houses of timber houses. And next is, next figure is RCC structure. And I showed in figure 7, traditional thatch roofed house. They are diminishing now. They are no more there. But still there are there are still some number, some housing stock which are of this type of thatched roof houses. So this gives you more or less overview what I am talking about. So what did we learn? What did we learn? And retrofitting program during this intervention, during the period of actually effectively from 2018 until now, this is the very effective period. You can see 3 years or so effective. What we learn out of it? Retrofitting program can be successful only if they should be easily understandable by the local people. People didn't really trust or believe that their cracked house can be retrofitted and can become habitable again. We could not convince a lot of. We made a lot of attempts there, but then the communication was not there. They didn't really were convinced with our message. And the next is train human resource like engineer as well as masons. At the initial stage, when they were not trained, they could not defend retrofit because they were not. They didn't get this skill before. It was not taught in the university, and then we provided some amount of training, 6-7 days training, but that training didn't really enhance their level of confidence. That's why unless we have to really train human resources, we can forget about the retrofitting. So we need a really competent hand. This is applicable for everybody, but this is more so for retrofitting because traditionally new houses are constructed over the period of time, generations by generations, because this is new technology and you need really trained human resources. And the solution must be affordable and culturally acceptable. And another factor at the initial stage, that what is the cost of retrofitting? We technologically it was convincing. Okay, it looks fine, good, but then how much amount of money will it really require to invest? So we should have been able to communicate this idea to them. And some statistics we received, some experiments received, it costs 1 million. It means 10,000 US dollar, or I mean, a huge amount of investment. Whereas we are just providing 1,000 US dollar as grant for retrofitting, and sometimes the cost goes to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, like that. So the point is, it must be affordable and culturally acceptable. And people-centered approach, I mean, this is universally true. But then house owner must be sensitized. They must be convinced. Otherwise, if the house owner does not convince, then it can't go. Public sector promoting of it. And here, major focus is, which NRA has trying to do, this public sector promotion of retrofitting is vital for creating earthquake resilient or resistant, I mean, housing stock. There is significant role of public sector. That's what one has to understand quite clearly. And how did we approach retrofitting? This is a technical. This is a bit technical, but I mean, most probably the housing shelter forum, most probably you must be familiar with this. So, but I will not go down a lot of technicalities of this, but just I would like to mention that these are the different interventions, retrofitting approaches we introduced in Nepal, and hopefully you can also give feedback to us. And we are also looking forward to replicate this to the international community as well, so that it can be replicable there. So you don't have to invest, I mean, resources for inventing these approaches. First is strong back technology. This is, I mean, reinforced concrete strong backs. There are certain columns, pillars in a specified designed spaces, and they are, I mean, tied up with slab strips and ring beam. So this is quite, I mean, simple structure. Inside the house, we create the pillars, and they are tied with each other, and there are concrete connects in the inner and outer rests. So that's how the whole structure is supported in a way by strong back, the pillars. And cement sand plaster is applied on the wall. The cement sand plaster application of cement sand is applicable for all retrofitting approaches, actually, whatever we have. So here, the difference is it introduces, I mean, RCC structure. So this is slightly different from other approaches that I'm going to explain later. And so this is further explanation of strong back technology. And light in gable, gable is, we found most, I mean, weakest actually, I mean, structure for destruction. Majority of houses, the gables are damaged by the earthquake. That's why we recommended light CGI or timber gable, and improvement to the connection with existing timber elements. So connection with the existing timber element is extremely important, I mean, aspect of this. So you can see the photograph here. This is the pillar, and there are, in this corner also there is pillar, and there is one tie beam all around the wall, and then also one tie beam on the ground level as well. So this is how, I mean, it is done. It is quite, I mean, simple structured, simple technology, but quite, I mean, a robust one. Another, we call it a mesh and splint bandage with local filler. This is the one which we introduced since very beginning. This is in this technology, you can see that the whole house is covered with wire mesh, vertical splint, horizontal bandage. You can see the bandage, horizontal and vertical bandage, and then they are tied up with the inside structure, outside structure. So the whole house becomes monolithic, and it becomes quite, I mean, robust as well. And this was introduced at the beginning of this. And this method is also quite, successful, and it is quite practiced, in majority of houses now as well. And GI wire mesh is prepared on site to control. So technologically, this is also not complicated. It is quite simple. The construction materials are available in the in country, and now we have trained a number of masons as well for the construction of this type of wire mesh, splint, and bandage retrofitting approach. And this is further explanation of wire mesh, splint, and bandage. Concrete is placed on foundation, and then wall is then. These are quite, simple construction technology. And for gable, like to strong back, there is CGI sheet or timber gable is recommended. And we have calculated some cost around $7,000 US per one retrofitting of one housing unit. Another is containment reinforcement integrated splint and bandage. This is this is a variation of splint and bandage. Basically, this is splint and bandage. So there are some elements are included, and that is horizontal bandage, secure on both faces, vertical splints. There are certain little extra instructions are added in this containment reinforcement integrated split and bandage. And this is further detail of containment reinforcement integrated splint and bandage. And the next is timber house retrofitting. As I mentioned that the manual for timber house retrofitting was introduced in 2018. And for this, actually, how to make this timber structure robust and which can withstand the seismic, vibration, as well as other, load as well. So mainly, connecting points are mainly focused, and the load bearing capacity of wooden timbers are also very much important for retrofitting of this this approach. So what are our outputs? If anybody interested there in the international community, today actually, we published one. We published 4 documents today. We are going to release tomorrow. One of them is NRA experience, whether it is visible or not. This is the NRA experience on retrofitting of private house. We published this. We also published norms. We published the roster, and we published also manual. So 4 documents are published today, and then they are going to be released by Right Honorable Prime Minister tomorrow. So this is quite good day. I am quite happy today because there are 6 documents are published, 2 journals. This is not related to retrofitting actually. 2 journals, Progress in Disaster Sciences, which is Elsevier journal, and we published one special issue of Nepal's Reconstruction. That is also published today. And then another, BICAS, actually, BICAS is a National Planning Commission journal, and we published BICAS as well. And 4 retrofitting documents. So those all are resources for national as well as international community, which can be used by anybody in Nepal and abroad, wherever it is required. And in addition to that, there are quite a number of videos we have. We have public service PSAs, we have booklets, we have other posters, flyers, apps, a lot of resources we have developed. And we also train engineers. You can see the numbers of engineers on the job training. We provided on the job training, various different type of engineers, civil engineers, soil engineers, and other type of engineers as well. Whether they are fully convergent on this is something else, but we provided training, and we are considering to provide also refresher training to them so that they are competent enough to handle retrofitting in future. And in terms of capacity building, basic concept of retrofitting we provided, different types of retrofitting technologies we provided, which I briefly described earlier. Design a retrofit solution, masonry structure, and inspection of retrofitting fitted houses, and retrofitting included onboarding and refreshers training. So a lot of trainings we provided on the job training, theoretical training to huge number of engineers, around 2,000 engineers, and all the trained manpower we produced on roster, as I mentioned earlier. We produce roster of all those engineers, and engineers as well as masons actually, and anybody who is interested to construct retrofit their house, they can contact them. The masons, engineers, social mobilizers, all involved in this retrofitting. We have now one complete roster so that people can contact them and then retrofit their house. So this is quite good wealth of resources we have produced. And this is further capacity development. And now I would like to spend a few more minutes on challenges and learnings. Actually, this is not challenge free, as everything is challenging. But retrofitting was rather more challenging, and the challenge has not been over until now. We will have this challenge further. We will be encountering in future as well while trying to replicate in the rest of the districts, 45 districts. We are considering to replicate this. And also, other remaining housing stock which are vulnerable in Kathmandu, in 32 earthquake affected districts, we would like to replicate this, but there are a number of challenges. The first challenge is risk awareness of need of retrofitting. People are living in the house, they don't realize what is the significance of retrofitting. Because people, there's no problem with house, they are just living there. And then the problem will occur only when the earthquake will strike. But then this is future unknown, remote risk, which people don't realize. And then because most of the people in the rural areas are also poverty stricken, they don't have surplus wealth to invest on the house. That's why they are not much tempted to retrofit their house. If the house is damaged, then they would have been forced to do something to construct new. But if they are just living there, they don't feel that their house has to be retrofitted. And willingness of retrofit beneficiaries to transfer. So this is one idea, because we could not make progress in terms of retrofitting. We means NRA, National Reconstruction Authority, didn't make progress in terms of retrofitting. That's why we allowed people to change their beneficiary status from retrofitting to full house. And then because people hadn't have trust on retrofitting, they converted from retrofitting, convert their status from retrofitting to the full house reconstruction category. And because they were waiting for this, and people were not motivated for retrofit their house, they rather wanted to construct new house. That was also another challenge. It means, the point message I would like to communicate is, we are confident that it will work, but how to communicate this and make people fully convinced that retrofitting really works is very big challenge. And grant amount, this is applicable for NRA. We had only $1,000 whereas retrofitting costed around $5,000 to $6,000, and the individual house owners had to top up around $4,000 to $5,000, which is huge amount of money. That also deterred actually. That didn't motivate people to retrofit their house. And more importantly, the soft loan and loan for retrofit was not provided. Banks provide normally, the urban areas provide loan for new construction, but for retrofitting, they refrain from providing loan for the retrofitting. That is another constraint. And we are working with banks, central bank, how to enable them or how to motivate them to give loan for retrofitting as well. So this is now challenge for NRA and later on NDRRMA. And the example of public confidence, the retrofitting of public buildings is also essential, because if people see some examples of retrofitting, then it becomes easier for them to replicate to their own house. So, but then the school buildings are not retrofitted and other government buildings are also not retrofitted. That's why we could not demonstrate that this technology really works. That was also another factor. So for making this approach successful, we need some demonstration project. That's why it works. That's why we had a number of partners like Alistair who worked in Build Sense and Europe's project, retrofitting project. We introduced something like model house where the beneficiary don't have to invest anything. The project provided resources for them to retrofit. The purpose of that idea was twofold. One was to demonstrate that retrofitting really works. Another is mainly they focused to the vulnerable household. That's why the vulnerable household issue they can't handle of themselves. That's why the problem of vulnerable household can be also addressed. So those two objectives were there. And there was misconception that this retrofitting technology is technically very challenging, not implementable. And the rumor was the engineers can't design. It costs huge amount of money for designing. So there are a lot of different rumors going around. That was also that created our life a bit difficult to communicate our message properly. Further continuation of challenges, that the building code compliance and life safety. This is very important actually. Now we have building code, and then for retrofitting guideline, the building code, the house must have to comply with building code. Now, with retrofitting, can we achieve that situation? Can it satisfy building code? That is the real problem crux. And within the policy making body, there is one strong argument that the retrofitted houses must have to have comply with building code. That is one argument. And another is not life safety. If the buildings, houses ensure life safety requirement, isn't that enough? Do they really need to satisfy building code? So this is the ongoing debate that we have to grapple with, that we have to resolve. And we are trying to produce some numericals on this, and with different construction approaches we had, and what type of building code compliance they make, and what else do we need to do, or is there any compromise in between? That is what we are now grappling with. Next is limited viable technology. We have, there are certain lacunae actually in our intervention. For example, how does row house act in terms of retrofitting? I was very, very much keen to pilot this idea of retrofitting for row houses. But that was that could not be possible because of this particularly COVID-19 situation. If COVID-19 situation would not have been there, then we would have experimented retrofitting in row housing. Most probably by now, we would have developed one clear methodology for row housing. Row housing means the houses on the street, in urban environment. What is the load distribution of those, street row housing, row houses? What are the consequences of one building collapse to another one? A lot of questions are there where we don't have still convincing answer. The next is adequate quality materials. Sometimes quality material is also challenged. This is not a very big challenge right now. We have contact with GI wire suppliers, and then this problem is largely resolved now. But still sometimes in the remote area that this could be some issue. Human resources, we have a lot of, we train a lot of human resources, which I demonstrated earlier, presented earlier. But still, in order to become them fully confident and conversant with the technology, we have to work further. So we have to still, provide additional capacity development packages to masons, engineers, sub-engineers, like that. So this is ongoing process, which we have to continue further. And lack of conducive policy environment. So policy environment, what does it really mean? Banking, loan, how we are, as I mentioned earlier, that we have to work for bank loan, as well as, we have to communicate to the people, and also the policy level environment. We have to fix policy level environment. For example, building code, what is the strength requirement for this type of retrofitting houses, whether we follow life safety measure or we secure building code compliance. So these are the policy level environment, and whether banks are willing to provide loan or grant for this type of retrofitting or not is another, issue to think of. Sorry. And what are a way forward? Way forward are now. I am happy to share this information. It is not fully approved actually. We after our workshop, we had one national level workshop on retrofitting before 1 month or so. After that, I have been working with Ministry of Urban Development, and I am encouraging them to have one national level program. It can be something like pilot program, but it has to be nationwide program. And right now, what we are considering, this is not approved. Just for your information, I don't want to give wrong message that this is approved. It is not. It is in the process of approval. If we can integrate, we can have provision of retrofitting in government budget for next year, then it will create something like platform actually. And we are considering to integrate this intervention with another intervention of people's housing program. Government has launched one program of people houses, means the vulnerable people, destitutes, or very poor echelon of the society. Their government supports them to construct their relatively safe house. For example, if the person has thatched house, government provides grant to convert their roof to the CGI roof, because CGI roof is much safer than the thatched roof, because thatched roof is vulnerable to fire, and also it has to be replaced times and again every 2 years, 3 years, like that. So that program is there. And we are trying to integrate this retrofitting program with that program, so that we are marrying them together, so that we can make robust intervention. And create mobile technical teams. We are also considering to prepare mobile technical teams, so that they just go around all districts and then provide something like TOT, training for trainers in each district, and they come back. And then there is one standing backup team, and then the something like supporting squad, and then they provide support whenever it is required. And next is comprehensive awareness campaign, so that we are also thinking of to kick off having comprehensive awareness program, awareness that the house may be okay now, but later on it may not be okay, that can't withstand really the earthquake. And we have recent example of earthquake, and the Western Nepal is more vulnerable now, because Western Nepal has not experienced tremor since last few centuries. And then scientists are saying that maybe the impact of earthquake in the Western Nepal will be rather catastrophic. That's why we will take these messages and try to persuade people to convert their house from vulnerable house to the earthquake resilient house. And sensitization, building ownership and stakeholders, that is another. Retrofitting included engineering, vocational training curriculums as well. Now, we are also working with the various institutes, universities, to integrate retrofitting, to amend their curriculum, engineering curriculum, vocational training curriculum, so that this can be also embedded in the course, so that the products of the engineers are trained itself. We don't have to provide additional top-up training. We can just give something like freshers training, not the fundamental training, so that we are trying to integrate that within their system. There are quite few more. I promise to Alastair to finish within 40 minutes. It is exceeding a bit. Can I take further 3-4 minutes, Alastair?
Yes, of course. I think we have time for that. So
yeah, thank you.
Carry on.
Thank you very much. So I'm approaching to the end anyway. So now another is the incremental retrofitting, because the retrofit of house for full house is costing around 5,000 to 6,000, sometimes 7,000 US dollar. And that becomes quite expensive for the rural folks, rural people. So that, I mean, we are considering for incremental retrofitting. It means maybe on the ground floor can be retrofitted this year. After 2 years, they can retrofit the upper, I mean, first floor or so. So that the house also are constructed in that fashion in Nepal. If they have only limited amount of houses, limited amount of money, capital, then they invest only for 2 rooms, and then further they expand further. So that's how they do. And similar approach can be replicated for retrofitting as well. That's what we are thinking of, and most probably we may come up with one methodology for incremental retrofitting pretty soon. And preparing ready-to-use design. So we have to, because there was rumor around that the structural engineer takes huge amount of money, maybe 400, I mean, a huge amount of money, $200, $300, $400, which is very much, extremely, I mean, which is not affordable for the rural, I mean, poor people. That's why we have to provide resources, as much resources as possible to the people, so that the designs, ready-to-use designs for mass replication and upscaling. We are also considering that. Research on prevalent building typologies and retrofitting solutions. The R&D has to go ahead, and then we have some plans for this. And institutionalization of trained human resources by formation of retrofit cadre up to local level. So this is a bit, I mean, ambitious take up, but we are now thinking to prepare one retrofit cadre, means the people who dedicate themselves for retrofitting. So the publishing, I mean, roster is also one step to that, so that, I mean, we can constantly update, I mean, that retrofit roster, so that, I mean, people know, like, who is involved in this profession, so that people can take their service. And improve supply chain and secure quality of construction material. It is already there, but some improvement may be also required. With this, I finish my presentation. Thank you very much. Alastair, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Chandra. And yeah, thanks for a great talk, a great presentation. So we'll now move on to the questions and answer stage. So we've got a little bit of time for it. I think the session goes on until 12:30, but we'll see how many questions come in.
I close my presentation, yeah?
Yeah, that's fine, Dr. Chandra. Yeah. So we've had a few just questions come in on the chat, and if people, I'll start with the questions on the chat, and then if people have other questions to ask, please either feel free to put them in the chat, or when the time comes, unmute yourself and you can ask them directly to Dr. Chandra. So maybe starting with the first one was Marcin has put one in the chat asking about the adoption of reinforcement quantities and techniques in the building. So whether you can comment on the adoption of the techniques and also the quantities of reinforcement required in the retrofitting buildings. And then also on the uptake by communities. So whether you can comment on how it's been uptaken by the communities themselves and whether that's happened. I know you've got some experience of that.
Yeah, Martin, thank you very much. If I understood your question quite correctly, Marcin, yeah, it is not Martin, Marcin, yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Marcin. This uptake of reinforcement concrete is quite, I mean, serious. I mean, serious in the sense that it is prevalent everywhere. If you go now to the far-flung hamlet in Asua, northern Nepal, or I mean, Okhalunga, Sangkhwasaba, wherever you go, the concrete is introduced. People would like to go for concrete structure if they can. So you can see choppers, helicopters, transporting reinforcement bars actually, and then they are transporting and they are constructing reinforcement concrete structure. So this is being used. I mean, we told them that, I mean, it is not necessary to use concrete. They can, for earthquake resilient, I mean, construction technology, they can use timber as well. But reinforcement technology is being used. And you are saying that, however, there is this hidden element that people often tend to save money on. Do you have any statistics or data on the uptake of reinforcement quantities and techniques in the houses built by communities? And would you be able, the statistics, we are now collecting, I mean, data on this. How many houses were constructed of what type? That is under analysis. Most probably, well, after 3-4 months' time, we should be able to, we will be able to share the information what you are looking for. But definitely, this is considered actually, I mean, one of the areas we are working on. Next is B. Did you require people to have security of land tenure to work on their homes? How hard was that? This is quite, I mean, important. This land tenure. For example, I didn't mention this because I didn't present over holistic. I mean, I didn't make holistic presentation of this our intervention. What we did is people have been living in public land, forest land for generations, and they are not holding land ownership certificate themselves. And NRAs, through NRAs, I mean, intervention, we secure the house where they are living. We gave them entitlement. Thousands of people actually, we provided entitlement to them so that the public land, now they have their own land registration certificate. So how hard that was, but I mean, it was difficult, but it was not impossible because government trusted us, NRA, to empower us to do so. Otherwise, cabinet only, I mean, had that authority to do that, but they trusted that, I mean, authority to us, and because of that, it was not difficult. We did quite, I mean, easily. I mean, that was not much challenging for us. So we provided entitlement to them, and then they are now living in their own house without any fear that, I mean, no government officer will come and demolish their house. We removed, I mean, we handled that, I mean, vulnerable people's interest in that way. So that is taken care of. And thanks for your inspiring presentation. Please receive a link to study we carried out on the architecture of the dry masonry. That is very good. Thank you very much, Julie. So I will go through your very important document, and then I may also contact you if I have the email address. Most probably, Alistair may be able to help me. And if there is, if necessary, I will be in touch with you. Would it be nice to have your feedback on this research for, okay. Let us take this up later, definitely, yes. Bill mentioned that 9,000 people died in earthquake, and of course, it is essential that Nepal is better prepared for this ever-present hazard. Of course, yes. Over 22,000 people die every year from respiratory disease caused by indoor air pollution. Could a similar effort be made to improve ventilator in houses, chimneys? This is very important. I mean, aspect you mentioned. But fortunately, actually, I mean, the new houses they are built, most of them, this is up to them actually. We didn't take this as condition, but our engineers, because our engineers, we have mobilized thousands of engineers, and then they provide not only earthquake resilient construction technology, they also provide support in this area as well. So this is something like promotional advice they receive. And I think the newly constructed 800,000 houses, I would be really surprised if they don't have chimney. Wherever I visited in the rural areas, they have proper chimney now. How effective they are is something different, but they have chimney.
Also, just maybe
yeah.
So just quickly add on that question from my side is that is something that we were looking at as an NGO in the country, was looking at how to make the retrofitted houses more comfortable for the inhabitants and discussing that with communities. And it's something that was included in certain designs. So it's definitely an important point that is.
Sure, of course. But I mean, this is, for example, not only this, for example, this lightning, a lot of people are dying with lightning strikes, and people die out of it. And we are also taking care of that. So all essential measures, actually, we are trying, but it is not really easy task, I mean, to do, because there is a lot of challenge for communicating this message to them, and they should be convinced, they should be persuaded for this. So, and then because of their ignorance, actually, I mean, it is very difficult for us to make them work in that way. But that is very good, I mean, suggestion. Thank you very much for that. And Julie further mentioned that this is study entitled State of Knowledge and Identification Research Priorities, Scientific Validation of Disaster-Resistant Building Culture of Himalayan Region, Nepal. Sure, thank you very much, Julie. I mean, I will go through that. And Tom mentioned that it is really exciting to see such a holistic program proposed at government level, and one which is so sensitive to people's needs and lived reality. I think the learning will be appreciable and applicable and relevant well beyond Nepal. You mentioned that financing is a big problem for retrofitting. Does the proposed program alongside an incremental approach include improved household financing? Actually, we are working on that, how to make that viable. It is not already done. We are now handling, we will start with low-hanging fruits, actually. Low-hanging fruits in the sense that the houses which are uh, going to receive government support, for example, the beneficiaries of people's houses, there we will definitely integrate this. Similarly, there are public buildings. In the school, we are considering to retrofit almost all, I mean, all public buildings, including schools, hospitals, health centers, everything. We will demonstrate there as well, so that in addition to that, I mean, we are also negotiating with banks and what will be the financial model for that, and in what terms will they be able to fund. Does it really need government subsidy? In what form? A lot of these activities are yet to be decided. We have to negotiate. This is not only wish of NRA, because NRA is going to phase out very soon. Within few months' time, we are going to phase out by December. Within December, we are trying to come up with some workable, functional model so that there can be a rollout in the future. But the point is taken, and we will be working on this. Hopefully, we will get through this. Yeah, pretty radical. Yes, it is pretty radical, but I mean, not undoable, perhaps. That's what we are hoping of. And Julian further mentioned that, thanks. Please receive my contact. Yes, thank you very much, Julie. That I will take note of that. And Tom mentioned that this lecture is co-hosted by the UK Center Forum and the UK's Institution of Structural Engineers. I'm also a member of Institute of Civil Engineers UK, by the way, which Alistair mentioned. Yes, very good that I'm in our fraternity, structural engineers. You mentioned the prohibitive cost of structural engineers. I know that in many countries, the engineering profession is too small and too stretched to be able to meet the need of its expertise. Do you have any thought on how the engineering profession can be and should improve access to it? That is a very good question, actually. I mean, I was ICE representative for Nepal, and I know what do you really mean. I worked for around 4 or 5 years as IC rep in Nepal. Yeah, there is huge, I mean, role there. Right now, I'm working on government side, and I'm trying to persuade government. I'm trying to handle this issue by developing different, I mean, prototype designs so that they don't have to prepare another design. So that, I mean, from supply side, I mean, interventions we are trying to make. And I have to really work with Nepal Engineering Association. And also, I mean, ICE is a representative in Nepal. I don't know, I mean, Structural Engineers Association is representative here or not, but they should be. Most of the structural engineers are a member of ICE as well. So let me talk with them, actually. I mean, you can give some suggestion how engineering community can help. Before, I mean, after earthquake, engineering community really supported for damage assessment. NEA, Nepal Engineers Association members, went to door, and then they tried to communicate the magnitude of destruction of their household's house, and then they also gave some suggestions. So that, I mean, it really helped. It really helped. And now for this undertaking. Let me talk with them, and if you have any contact, if through this actually, if Structural Engineers UK Structural Engineers Association would like to have engagement with us, definitely I will be interacting with you, and then whatever methodology or approaches we will develop, I can share with you. We can have that sort of collaboration already now, and I can link with Nepal Engineers Association as well, so that we can develop something like working platform for retrofitting intervention, which can be replicated to other areas as well. There is huge responsibilities of structural engineers. I am not a structural engineer by profession. I am transport planner actually, but I definitely have to do within these areas because of my experience in this field, and then also seeing the its importance. So let us be in touch actually. Maybe Alistair can liaise between us.
So Tom, did you have anything to say on that? Because
I think that would be great. I think that would be great. And Alistair and I are both involved with the Institution of Structural Engineers, but we're also, I think both of us are probably both members of the ICE as well. And we've been in touch with the Institution of Civil Engineers on similar matters. So it would be really good to just follow up and see what opportunities there are about sharing knowledge at least, and otherwise, and further collaboration if possible. So yes, let's be in touch.
Yeah, definitely. And next is Toresani. Yeah, Toresani. You mentioned that, thank you very much, inspiring presenter, how the government is dealing with the reconstruction process and the issue of people living in risk areas where they excluded from program, not included since the survey phase. How could the government deal with this? Is quite important question actually you posed. All our mandate, National Reconstruction Authority's mandate, was for the damage and destruction caused by 2015 earthquake. That is our limitation. We can't go beyond that. There are a lot of people suffered from flood, fire, and other natural disasters. That is there. Your concern there is legitimate. Now government has formed another institution called NDRRMA. Quite mouthful actually name. National Disaster Authority, let us make it management authority. That NDRRMA is responsible for handling all these issues actually, flood, landslide prone, etc. And we are hand-holding NDRRMA, and we are sharing our experience. We are mobilizing our geologists for their support, and we are providing all resources, whatever we have, to them. But then that is quite infantile, organization right now. It will take some time actually for them to establish fully. There are certain legal issues. There are certain other technical issues also there. So our main focus right now is to create them as viable disaster authority, so that they can handle all these issues. So per se, formally, if you ask me formally, then government is responsible, and the NDRRMA is responsible from government side. That is formal answer. But then will they be able to handle meaningfully the way how NRA has been handling issues? There are certain issues that has to be resolved, and then most probably they will be able to do that. And Dipti has questioned that number of engineers and construction people trained through this process. Would you have information on the percentage of women trained in total, and was this an opportunity that was sought to enable more women to gain knowledge? This is wonderful actually question actually, Dipti. We promoted, you'd be really surprised now in the engineering colleges, the ratio is around 60-40. Sometimes, we girl engineer are 50-50 actually, and that is the ratio we are talking about. And that is reflected in terms of engineering profession as well. Now, a lot of lady engineers are coming up, and they are taking that responsibilities. But the problem with, lady engineers is they try to avoid by all means to go to remote areas. It is difficult for them from the security point of view. Also, there are a lot of issues involved, said and unsaid issues actually. for them to go to remote areas, because our engineers are scattered all over, I mean, these rural municipalities, far-flung rural municipalities. And most of the time, they don't have motorable access, actually. They have to walk for days. It is quite a harsh environment. It is not simple environment. And there, the girls, lady engineers, find a bit difficult. That's why most of them are engaged in urban areas, accessible areas, relatively comfortable areas. And because of their overwhelming demand, actually, I mean, request, not demand, NRA is also a bit lenient about this, their demand, and then we are deputing them in urban areas. If you come and visit Kathmandu Valley, Kathmandu, Lalitpur, Bhaktapur, this is the capital city, almost all engineers are lady engineers because this is accessible and it is close to their home and they would like to stay here. So that they are lady. If you go to district headquarters, there you will find a number of lady engineers there. But in remote areas, of it, we have to still make conducive environment for them to go there. So in addition to that, we made conscious effort for training, providing training to lady masons. Yeah, traditionally it was unthinkable. I mean, it was prohibited in a way for a lady to become a mason. It was prohibited. It was not expected. But now, if you go to the rural areas, and you may see few, not many, few women mason who are proud and then in their profession, and they are working on this. So we are trying our best. There are constraints, but we are trying our best to promote ladies, I mean, in this profession. I think I came to the end of...
Yeah, I think that's everything. Maybe just I'll just put a couple of extra things in just for people. So, Dipti, for your question is, and just very much agreeing with Dr. Chandra, that it's very much on the mason side of things. So capacitating people who live at their houses and want to work on their houses. There we saw much better uptake of lady masons, and also over time, over the construction, that involvement really increased. So it started relatively low, but over the time of the reconstruction, definitely saw a lot of progress in the percentages increasing. And then just to the previous question from Torasani, so is yes, just to add on, in my current role that I'm working in is we're very much looking at all risks in Nepal. So earthquakes and floods are key, but then landslides, lightning, and a couple of glacial lake outbursts. So there are a few perils, and they're all being looked at either with the NDRMA or the Ministry of Finance or other organisations. And then, as Dr. Chandra said, the NRA is very much sort of hand-holding the NDRMA forward and making sure that information is there. So, sorry. So, did anyone have any further questions for Dr. Chandra, either to say in person or to add to the chat? Okay. Well, I think then if everyone's happy, then I'd like to take this time to thank Dr. Chandra for your talk. It was, yeah, I mean, for me, and I hope for everyone else, I speak for everyone else, that it was really interesting and just great to see sort of what the NRA has done, especially in retrofitting, and where you think it could lead, and also how the NRA is enabling that to happen. I think so often the learnings are lost and things don't move on, and that is something I think in Nepal is very much being done, is that these learnings are being carried forward. We're taking the challenges into note and then moving forward with trying to make the country more resilient. So I just like to thank you for the presentation and thank everyone for attending. I don't know if Tom or Step there's anything else to add on a formal basis.
No, I don't think so. Just a big thank you, Dr. Chandra, for speaking. It's a great privilege to have you, and I hope to see lots of you at the next session after lunch.
I would like to also thank both actually institutions, this UK Center Forum as well as Structural Engineers Association, for inviting me, particularly Alistair, because of our connection. You invited me and gave opportunity to share our ideas, thoughts here. I'm really thankful for that. And then hopefully, I mean, our engagement created through this presentation, we can continue later. And what I can assure you is there are a lot of, I mean, structural engineering issues we are grappling with. And then I will link you up. Anybody actually interested, you can disseminate this idea. We can make presentation, and if you have any feedback on that, and we will be really grateful. So it is in a way, I mean, we will be expecting your support to reinforce or confirm our methodology. On the other hand, it will be also maybe interesting for you to resolve what are the problem of developing countries, I mean, problem issues, structural engineering issues, and how to resolve them. Most probably that will be also interesting, and where we can, both of us can win or gain or benefit with each other. So I am really grateful for both of you for inviting me, and also on behalf of National Reconstruction Authority, I would like to thank both institutions again. Thank you very much for this opportunity once again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.